tax on Wall Street speculation. Eight years ago, when Wall Street's greed and recklessness and illegal behavior brought this country into the worst economic decline since the Great Depression, Congress, against my vote, bailed them out. Well, in my view, now is the time for Wall Street to help the middle class of this country. This campaign is listening to senior citizens, disabled veterans, and people who have disabilities. A great nation is not judged by the number of millionaires or nuclear weapons it has. A great nation is judged by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable among us. Today in Kentucky and in Vermont and in states all over this country, and you don't hear a whole lot about this, but there are millions of seniors and disabled vets who are trying to get by on $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. And you know what? Nobody can get by on $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. You can't buy the medicine you need, the food you need, pay the rent. You just can't do it. Now, what the Republicans say when they hear this, they say we're going to cut Social Security benefits. We are not going to cut Social Security benefits. We, in fact, are going to expand Social Security benefits. Let me, for a moment, talk about some of the differences that exist between Secretary Clinton and myself. And one of the differences is very important because it deals with how you raise the money you need for your campaign. Now, the truth is that in the year 2016, it cost hundreds of millions of dollars, unfortunately, to run for president of the United States. And when we began this process, we had to make a very simple decision. Do we do what every other campaign for president is doing and establish a super PAC? Do we beg Wall Street and corporate America and the drug companies for campaign contributions? Well, we agreed with you. And we concluded that we don't represent the billionaire class. We don't represent Wall Street. We don't represent corporate America. We don't want their money. And we're going to raise our campaign funds in a different way. And then I never would have believed, to be very honest with you, that this could have happened. But in the last year, we have received over 7.3 million individual contributions. $7.3 million. Anyone know what the average contribution is? I love that. I really love that. What is revolutionary about that is we have shown the world that we can run a winning national campaign without being dependent on powerful and wealthy special interests. Secretary Clinton has chosen to raise her funds in a different way. She has a number of super PACs, and in the last filing period, her major super PAC reported $25 million from special interest, including $15 million from Wall Street. In addition to that, as some of you may know, Secretary Clinton has given a number of speeches to Wall Street financial institutions for $225,000 a speech. Now, $225,000, that is a lot of money. And I kind of figure that if you give, it must be a speech that will help us solve all of our global problems. It must be a speech written in Shakespearean prose. And therefore, I think a speech that extraordinary should be shared with all of the people. Secretary Clinton has said, well, she will release the transcripts when other people do the same. So let me make, here in Louisville tonight, let me make a special announcement. And that announcement is, I am prepared to release the transcripts of all of the speeches I have given on Wall Street. All right, Louisville, you ready? There it is. Shh. You got it. All right, did you get all of the transcripts? You got them, okay. No speeches, not for $2.25, not for $2, no speeches behind closed doors to Wall Street at all. But you know, I got my cell phone on, and I'm waiting for that call from Wall Street inviting me to give them a speech. And I'm going to make it easy for Wall Street. I don't want $225,000. I don't want $25. I don't want anything. But I do want the opportunity to tell them face to face what their greed and illegal behavior has done to this country. As a result of what they have done, as many of you know, millions of our fellow Americans have lost their jobs, they have lost their homes, they have lost their life savings, and Wall Street has got to understand that. And I want to tell you a brief story which kind of encapsulates everything that this campaign is about. A few weeks ago, Goldman Sachs, one of the major financial institutions, they reached a settlement with the federal government for $5 billion. And they reached that settlement because they had been selling worthless packages of subprime mortgage loans. In other words, they were ripping people off and operating in a fraudulent. But to be fair to Goldman Sachs, they were not the only one. That's what every one of these damn banks was doing. Now, here's the other thing to understand when we talk about America today and why it is too late for establishment politics and establishment economics. Goldman Sachs, the other major Wall Street banks, operate in a fraudulent manner. Goldman Sachs paid $5 billion settlement. But that's not all. Over the last 25 years, the political power of Goldman Sachs through the revolving door process meant that at least two top executives at Goldman Sachs went on to become secretaries of the Treasury. And many other executives assumed very important positions in Democratic and Republican administrations. You all know what the revolving door means? What the revolving door means is you work on Wall Street, you go into the government, you represent Wall Street in the government, and then you go back to Wall Street. That's what the revolving door is about. Thirdly, what Goldman Sachs has done over the years, like other Wall Street financial institutions, they have made huge, and I mean huge, campaign contributions to politicians of all stripes. And here is the last thing that we need to know about what's happening at Goldman Sachs. And this really, really gets the American people angry. Today in Kentucky or in Vermont, some kid gets picked up with marijuana. That kid will get a criminal record that will last his entire life. All right, hang on there. We're going to deal with that one in a minute. But here is my point. If you're a kid with marijuana, you got a criminal record, last your entire life, which is no joke, because you go out and you try to get a job with a criminal record, may not be so easy. But if you are an executive on Wall Street, if you are the 1%, if you are part of the most powerful institution in America, you can commit illegal acts which wreck the lives of millions of people. And you know what happens to you? You get an increase in your compensation package. Well, you know what we're going to do together? We are going to bring justice back to the criminal justice system. And justice means that even if you're wealthy and powerful, and if you break the law, you have got to pay the price. Let me talk about just a few other differences between Secretary Clinton and myself. All of you know that one of the very important things that a president of the United States does is deal with foreign policy and military policy. The most important debate that we have had as a country in the modern history of the United States has been over the war in Iraq. I listened in 2002 very closely to what President Bush I think we don't know. Let's hold off. Not for sure. All right, but back to 2002. And here is the issue. All of us know that there are no more important issues than the issues of war and peace. And I know that as a congressman and a senator. Because when you vote for a war, you know that some of the young people in your state who you send off at deployments, and you say, God bless you, best of luck, you know that some of those young men and women will not come home. And I listened very carefully to what Bush and Cheney and all the rest were saying about Iraq. And not only did I vote against that war, I lead the opposition to that. And it gives me no pleasure. I wish I could tell you otherwise. It gives me no pleasure to tell you that if you go to my website, listen to what I said on the floor of the House in 2002. And much of what I feared about the destabilization that would take place in the Middle East turned out to be true. On the other hand, Secretary Clinton, then the senator from New York State, she heard the same evidence that I heard. She voted for the war in Iraq. And while we are on issues of war and peace, let me say this. We all know that not only should ISIS be defeated, ISIS must be crushed. But we also know that this country and our brave men and women in the military should not be involved in perpetual warfare in the Middle East. Now, I have heard many of my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, especially on the floor of the Senate, on the floor of the House, they're really tough. They want to go to war here. They want to go to war there. They want to go there. But let me tell you something. It is not their kids who are going to go to war. It is the children of working families in this country. So we have got to understand that war and military force sometimes, of course, has got to be used. But it is the last recourse, not the first recourse. There is another area where Secretary Clinton and I disagree. She wants to raise the minimum wage, and that's good. She wants to raise it to $12 an hour. Not good enough. I am proud to have stood on the picket lines with fast food workers from McDonald's and Burger King. And they understand that in this country we need a $15 an hour minimum wage. And I will stand with those workers in that fight. This campaign is asking the American people to think outside of the box and outside of status quo thinking. This campaign is asking people why it is that there is only one major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people. Now, I have been criticized for saying this, so let me say it again. And this is a big, big deal. In my view, health care is a right of all people, not a privilege. And thinking outside of the box, ask us to think why it is that if you are wealthy in this country, you can get great health care. But if you're working class or poor, you may not have any health insurance at all, or you're going to have very high deductibles and co-payments. We lose thousands of people every year who do not have the money to go to the doctor when they should. In my view, when we understand that 29 million Americans have no health insurance, even more are underinsured, and when we are getting ripped off every single day by the drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world for medicine, when we end up paying far more per capita for health care than do the people of any other major country, now is the time for us to go forward and pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. Now I want you to think for a moment, and this is thinking outside of corporate TV. It's thinking outside of go. Think what that means for America. It means that anybody in this country who gets sick goes to the doctor when they need to go. It means that if you get seriously ill or you have an accident, you run up a big hospital bill, you're not going to go bankrupt. And this is what it also means, which is pretty revolutionary. It means that right now in America, we have millions of people doing jobs that they really do not want to do, but they're staying on those jobs because they may have a decent health insurance plan for their families. Think what happens to America when we unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of this country. When millions of people can go out, start businesses, and know that they will have health insurance for themselves and their families. That is revolutionary. This campaign is listening to our brothers and sisters in the African American community. And they are crying out for reforms of a broken criminal justice system. Now, I was a mayor for 8 years, and I worked very closely with my local police department and police departments all over this country. Vast majority of police officers are honest, hardworking, and they're doing a very, very difficult job. They deserve our support. But like any other public official, when a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. We need major reforms of local police departments. We've got to start demilitarizing local police departments. We have to make local police departments reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. We need, as a nation, to understand that lethal force, the killing of somebody, is the last response, not the first response. We need to end, and I've got legislation in to do this, private corporate ownership of prisons and detention centers. We need to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Over the last 30 years, millions of people have received criminal records because of possession of marijuana. Today, under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug next to heroin. I have introduced legislation and will implement as president getting marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. States, it is the decision of the people of a state to decide whether they want to legalize marijuana or not, and more states are doing that. But it should not be a federal crime. And when we talk about drugs in my state and all over this country, we are facing an enormous crisis with opiate addiction and with heroin addiction. Every day, people are dying from overdosing on those drugs. Now, in my view, if we are going to deal effectively with that crisis, what we have got to understand is substance abuse and addiction should be treated as a health issue, not a criminal issue. And that means that we need in this country a revolution in mental health treatment. Right now, in virtually every part of this country, people who are suffering mental health crises, people who are suffering with addictions, people who are suicidal, people who may be homicidal, they cannot get the treatment they need when they need it. And that has got to change. You know, we spend trillions of dollars on the war in Iraq. We have spent billions rebuilding infrastructure in Iraq and Afghanistan. And yet, if you look at the inner cities of this country, what you see is outrageous levels of unemployment and poverty, people who cannot find affordable housing, and you're seeing schools that are crumbling. If we can rebuild the infrastructure of Afghanistan, we damn well can rebuild the inner cities.
Viva Bernie!
When you are undocumented and when you have no legal protection, that means that when you go to work, you can be exploited by your employer because you have immigration reform. I will use the executive powers of the presidency to do all that I can. This campaign is listening to a group of people whose pain is almost never heard, and that is the Native American community. All of you know that from before this country became a country, when the settlers first came here, the Native American people were lied to, they were cheated, and treaties that they had signed were broken. And all of you also know that we owe a debt of gratitude to the Native American people that we can never repay. They have taught us so much. One of the important lessons that they have taught us, which we must learn, is that as human beings, we are part of nature. That as human beings, we must exist with nature, not destroy nature. And that takes us to an issue not only of enormous importance for our country, but of enormous importance for the entire planet. And that is, as a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment, I have talked to scientists all over this country and all over the world. The debate is over. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change is already causing devastating problems in this country and throughout the world. We have a moral responsibility as custodians of this planet to make certain that we leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable for our children and our grandchildren. And that means that we must stand up to the fossil fuel industry and tell them that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet. Now, I understand that as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency, to sustainable energies like wind, solar, geothermal, and other technologies, there will be economic dislocation. And there will be innocent people who want nothing more than to provide for their families, who will be hurt in that transition. And that is why in the legislation that I have offered in the Senate, the most comprehensive climate change legislation ever offered in the Senate, that we provide $41 billion to help workers who might be dislocated. I know that all over this country there is a fear that Donald Trump will be elected President of the United States. I am here to tell you that won't happen. It won't happen. It won't happen because in every national poll that I have seen for a long time, we beat Trump by double-digit numbers. But it is not only the polls. Polls go up and polls go down. It is also the fact that the American people will not elect a candidate who insults every group that you can think of virtually every day. We are not going to elect a president who insults Mexicans and Latinos, who insults Muslims, who insults veterans, who insults women, who insults African Americans. The American people understand that our strength is in our diversity. They understand that when we come together as one people, black and white and Latino and Asian American and Native American, gay and straight, whatever we may be, we are stronger. And the American people understand that coming together always trumps dividing us up. And the American people also understand that what America is about and what makes us great is supporting each other. That when your family is in trouble, my family and our country are there for you. When my family is in trouble, your family and this country are there for us. And the American people understand that supporting each other always trumps selfishness. Most importantly, I think the American people understand what every major religion on earth has taught us for centuries. And that is that at the end of the day, love always trumps hatred. History has taught us one very profound lesson, and that is real change takes place from the top on down. It always takes place from the bottom on up. Whether it is the history of workers standing up and fighting for their rights and forming unions, it is the civil rights movement where millions of people came together and said that we will end racism and bigotry in this country. And some of them went to jail. Some of them went to jail. Some of them died in the struggle. But they and their male allies said that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. If we were here 10 years ago, no time at all, and somebody jumped up and said, you know, I think that in the United States of America, by the year 2015, gay marriage will be legal in every state in this country. Most people would not have believed that that would be possible. But what happened is over the decades, the gay community and their straight allies stood up, fought back, and said that in America, people should have the right to love whoever they wanted. That is the history of change. Change is about people by the millions looking around them and saying the status quo does not work. The status quo is wrong. We are going to change the status quo. And today, all over our country, coast to coast, people are looking and they're saying, you know what? This grotesque level of income and wealth inequality is wrong. It is wrong that the middle class for 40 years has been in decline. It is wrong that people have to work 2 or 3 jobs to survive. It is wrong that young people are leaving school $50,000 in debt. It is wrong that women are making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. It is wrong that we are the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave, or that all of our people do not have health care as a right. And when people begin to look at those issues, they begin to challenge establishment thinking. And when people begin to look at these issues, they say, you know what? This is the United States of America. We can do better. What this campaign is about is telling you that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can transform this country in the way we need change all by himself. It can't be done by one person, because the powers that be on Wall Street, in corporate America, in the corporate media, in wealthy campaign contributors, these folks are so powerful that no one president can do it alone. What we need and what this campaign is about is a political revolution. And what that revolution means is that millions of people today are beginning to stand up and fight back and demand a government which represents all of us, not just a handful of billionaires. Next week, there is going to be a very important primary here in the beautiful state of Kentucky. And what we have learned so far on the campaign is that if there are large voter turnouts, we win. Let us make certain that for the Kentucky Democratic primary, we have the largest voter turnout in history. Thank you all very much.